Listen up. Welcome to the Louisville Urban League's radio show and podcast, which comes out every Thursday from 12 to 12:30 on WLLV 101.9 FM or 1240 AM. My name is Lyndon Pryor. I am the Chief Engagement Officer for the Louisville Urban League. Some call me the voice. And welcome back to the show this week. I hope everyone has had a positive and productive week. I know that there's been a lot going on in and around the city, but I just hope that you are well and that all those that you love and care about are well as well. This week, we've got a really special show, and before I get into it, because it's actually connected, I want to make sure that I shout out Trap Moore, local beat maker and producer. Please go out and support him. He provided the beat for us on the intro and outro to this podcast that you hear every week. And so we appreciate him. Please go out and support that brother. But for this week's show, we have a very special guest, a Louisville native and another member of the Louisville Urban League team, Ms. Cynthia Brown, who is our director for the Center for Entrepreneurship here at the Louisville Urban League. Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Hi, Lyndon. I'm glad to be here today.
And so one of the cool things about getting to do this show over the last few weeks, I mean, obviously being able to talk about the work and the things that the Louisville Urban League is doing and its importance to community. But it's also getting to know people and getting to allow people to share, you know, kind of their own stories. And I always love when we have the Louisville natives on to be able to share. I acknowledge openly that I'm a transplant. I've been here 8 years. And so but I know it's a little different when folks from here and of this place. And so that is who you are. And so tell the people who don't know who you are, though I know you got tons of family and friends who are listening because you're related to everybody. Tell the folks who you are and just a little bit about your background.
Okay. Yes, I am born and raised in Louisville. Spent most of my growing up years in West End and still currently live there. I know the most important question that everybody wants to know is, where did you go to high school? I went to the Brown High School from 3rd to 12th grade, so a lifelong Brown School student. And then following high school, I actually went to college here at University of Louisville, too. So all my time spent here at Louisville.
And Shawnee neighborhood, correct?
Shawnee neighborhood, born and raised. I have some family in Russell, but most of my family grew up in Shawnee. So
awesome. So you have, you know, obviously you were here at the league and doing the work around entrepreneurship and black business, and we're going to get into that. But of all the folks at the league, you have kind of one of the most diverse paths and backgrounds, both personal as well as professional. And so talk a little bit about, you know, just kind of your story and how you've gotten to this work, you know, from your days at Brown.
Okay, yeah, my path definitely was not a straight path. We took a lot of turns and twists, and to some it probably doesn't make a lot of sense, all the things that I've done and how it all comes together. But for me, it has made sense. So I actually went to school for communication, and then I took a little detour and went to school for graphic design, and those two seem to go together for me, you know. Mm-hmm. So I did a lot of marketing consulting and graphic design and working with promotions, those kinds of things. Those two just seemed to go together and made sense. And so I did that freelance for a long time with my own business. And that was actually kind of how I got started in entrepreneurship. Just right out of the gate, didn't know anything, just started doing it. And so it was a big learning curve for me doing that. I then went to work for a corporate advertiser. And so learned a lot about small businesses. Most of the businesses, that we worked with that were advertising were kind of mom and pop shops. And so I really got to learn a lot about the challenges of small businesses and kind of, the space they were occupying, what they were doing and what they needed, what they really didn't need, those kinds of things. Outside of that kind of professional track, I've had a lot of things that I did on the outside of that. One is I have a background in ballet, which a lot of people don't know. So I danced from the time I was 6 to, I would say somewhat currently. I want to say I'm retired now, but I danced for Louisville Ballet for some time. And then I participated in a program in New York. It was the School of American Ballet, where I was up there for several summers in a row at the Juilliard. And then here locally, I've done a lot of like community related things. I was a part of Roots and Wings, which was an 18-month Art Place America grant where we did performances. We traveled to different community centers and did workshops with the youth there, trying to address some of the issues that were going on in our communities. And actually, we were partners with the Office for Safe and Healthy Neighborhoods on that. And then we also traveled to Africa. So that was a good piece of that. And since then, I've done just various performances with different local groups here, like Belize Dance Intermix and performing at Festival of Face and things like that. And one other little thing I like to throw in there is that I have a background in martial arts. I am actually a black belt. I did tournaments, the whole nine, that kind of thing. So it's a black belt in Wing Chun. So
Kung Fu, y'all. She actually knows Kung Fu. Like, that's nuts. Okay, so tell me then, how do those things come together to lead you into the space that you're in now around, incredible innovation and advocacy for and support for Black businesses and Black entrepreneurs?
Okay, so in addition to the arts, one of the other things that I was involved in for several years was working with some victims advocacy groups. So we worked with primarily Black families that had loved ones that were victims of violent crimes, most of the times homicides, and just trying to walk those families through what happens. I mean, there isn't a handbook on how you deal with that. So just trying to plug in resources and be some sense of help for those families. Like I said, born and raised in West Louisville, I don't think that you can live in West Louisville without some kind of acknowledgement of what's happening in our community. And so me as a resident there and having nephews and nieces and godsons and adopted sons, especially, when it comes to like Black males, that was a concern for me. So that was a part of my give back. So for me, what happens in our community and being able to be present and aware and advocate for things that are going on in the community was really, really important to me. So how those things came together, I spent some time in corporate, like I said, and at one point I got laid off and I thought, okay, this is the time for me to really sit back and figure out what it is that I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it. And going back into corporate just wasn't an option for me. So how do I put these two skill sets together? My care for my community and my people, and then also this set of business skills that I have. How do I do that in a different type of environment? And so nonprofit obviously was the answer, but where do you do that? I was fortunate enough to come across an organization that worked doing small business development and micro lending, primarily to underserved communities. So I worked a lot in West Louisville, South Louisville, had a big focus on refugees and immigrants and that whole set of challenges, and then doing some micro lending to be able to get these businesses off of the ground. So I was very fortunate to be able to find a place where I could intersect those two skill sets.
So in thinking about I don't know that a lot of people understand the gravity of the problem when it comes to entrepreneurship and Black businesses in particular. Can you talk a little bit about the disparity that exists between employer-owned Black businesses and basically everybody else?
That disparity is huge. Back during the pandemic, I worked on a committee with the city that was evaluating and reviewing applications that were for their small business COVID relief grants. And just the number of Black businesses that were not able to get through that process was staggering, and it was disappointing. I had my team and some other organizations had teams that were trying to work behind the scenes to help, just pull together, paperwork and getting financial reports and things like that just to get through the application process. That just wasn't happening. As we moved a little bit further along into the pandemic and then the social unrest started, we started to hear this statistic of about 2% of Louisville businesses were minority owned. So that's minority owned. That's not Black owned. So when you back that down to really look at the number of Black businesses and then start to consider the number of Black businesses that closed during the pandemic, everybody was struggling, but Black businesses closed at a much, much higher rate than their white counterparts. So that number started to look a little bit more than like less than 1%. And that was just unacceptable.
So when we talk about the importance, particularly for the Black community, of the ability to start your own, I think the way in which the league connects this is we recognize that there are a whole host of barriers for individuals just in the normal workforce, right? Lots of reasons why people can't get jobs, won't be able to move up in jobs. Some of that is racism and discrimination. Some of it has to do with policies that are in place that discriminate against people who may have criminal background history or educational disparities, or lots of different things. And so entrepreneurship becomes a space for a lot of people to be able to find wealth and upward mobility, because those doors may be closed or at least partially closed in other spaces, right? And so that's why, just, to kind of level set, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that is why this space is so important, and why we, through the path and the work that we're doing around Black businesses, have begun to focus here, is because we recognize that we have to open lots of different pathways for folks to get there. Would you agree?
I definitely would agree with that. When we talk about the typical ways that most people attain wealth or definitely build generational wealth, home ownership is one and business ownership is the other. And for Black businesses, like all of the things that, that you just related, are problems. But with businesses, you get a whole new set of challenges. So by deciding to do something on your own and have control over, your own financial viability, that kind of thing, you kind of back away from one set of barriers, but you get a whole new set of barriers. And so those barriers, in particular, just to put it in a nutshell, there are two main barriers. One is just access to resources. So that's actually the technical assistance and the knowledge of operating businesses and really kind of understanding and beefing up that business acumen. And then the other one, obviously, is access to capital.
Yes. And we're going to jump into both of those here in just a second. But I do want to throw out that I've always said, I'm probably going to be somebody who's going to always, get a W-2, because being an entrepreneur is its own thing, right? You got to have a different mindset. You got to have a different ability and capacity to want to take on everything that comes with it. It is not, I think sometimes there, particularly in this society, and depending on what politicians you listening to, this idea that everybody can be a business owner. And it's well, not necessarily, right? That may not be the path for everybody. And I just like to throw that out here because I think sometimes we undersell how very hard and difficult it is to be an entrepreneur, even if you've got all of the things going in your favor, right? Even if you've got the capital, you got the technical assistance, all of that, it's still a very, very hard road to go down, right?
Oh, yeah. Entrepreneurship is not for everybody, and it definitely isn't for the faint of heart. When you go into entrepreneurship, and I always tell people this, for one, make sure it's something that you actually like to do and that you love, because the amount of time and the work that you're going to have to put into it, that love of what you're doing sometimes is going to be the only thing that gets you through that day.
Right.
As an entrepreneur, you have to wear all the hats. Most, small businesses don't start out with, large teams and being able to, delegate things to different departments. Most small businesses, they don't have a marketing department and a finance department. You have to do all of the things for the business. So you're trying to wear all of those hats. You're trying to understand the business, how to direct the business and, guide it to, to growth. And then you're also just managing the day-to-day operations. There's no time clock to punch that says, okay, I need to get up today and I need to start working on my business and I need to make sure I work on it from, 11 to 2, making customer calls or shipping out packages or whatever it may be. Those are things that you have to self-motivate yourself to do. And so entrepreneurship is definitely not for everyone. And so I think, a lot of times they talk about the entrepreneurial mindset, and people want to boil it down, I think, sometimes to just like what your risk tolerance is. But it's really not about your risk tolerance. It's about your work ethic. And if you really love what you do and that you're going to, put the right amount of work into it and to keep it going, because you have to do everything. Absolutely.
So jumping back into kind of the barriers and challenges and what, we at the league and our partners are doing. You mentioned technical assistance and capital. So the ability to find money and to be able to start and grow and sustain your business, because it takes money to make money, right? Like you need that money on the front end in order to be able to do that as being a barrier. And then the natural technical assistance that happens. What is, and this will be kind of a two-part question because I want to make sure people kind of understand what's happening out there. What typically happens for an entrepreneur? Take your normal white male startup entrepreneur. What generally happens for them on the way to success?
I think every entrepreneur's journey is going to be a little bit different. But I do think that what white entrepreneurs may have sometimes that's not happening for Black entrepreneurs is that network of support. So typically when businesses get going, a lot of times white entrepreneurs are able to rely on family or friends to get what I call that first cash injection. They get that buy-in. They're also able to leverage what I call the social capital of having the networks of to say, okay, well, you know what, you're going to need an accountant or you're going to need someone to fill this function for the business. Let me connect you with the one that does the accounting for my friend's business or that kind of thing. And then I think just because of what has been the barriers to having so few Black businesses, those kind of networks just don't exist in that same kind of way. So when we're talking about getting, Black businesses, strong, stable, getting them started, getting them sustained, we have to start from scratch a lot of times, really, in trying to fill in some of those gaps that are, existing for white entrepreneurs. And that's on top of all of the other struggles that come with just being an entrepreneur, period.
And I mean, and certainly the networks are huge, but for, the white entrepreneur who's listening to this, like, I ain't have any of those networks. There's also a very real thing that when it comes to lending and being able to go to banks, there are literally decades of document all the way up to 2023 of documented disparities in lending between Black people and virtually everybody else, right? And so it is to say that there is a system of policies and practices in play that make it much more difficult, unfortunately, for most Black, and not all, but for most Black entrepreneurs who are setting off down this path. And so the work, then, to turn to the work of the league and of the path is to find different ways to either eliminate or navigate around those existing barriers, right?
Yeah, I mean, these disparities are realities. Now, whether everybody wants to admit they exist or not, they are real. They do exist. And when we talk about this, I always try to say typical, because we're not talking about things on an individual level. And I think you're absolutely right when you talk about like the systemic things that have been in place. So like every white entrepreneur, again, I said, going to have an individual, journey is there for their entrepreneurship. But typically what we see, these are the things that really kind of impede the progress of Black-owned businesses.
And so what we've done through the path has been to partner with really a host of different folks. So who is in this ecosystem that we are building? I won't even say that it's fully done, but that we are building. Yeah,
the ecosystem. That has been really interesting to build because, like I said, I think we're starting from scratch on a lot of these businesses and really trying to fill in the gaps. And I think what has previously existed, there has been a certain set of resources that were available. But when I think of ecosystem, I think of something a little bit different. I think about the connection between those resources. And so while there were resources there, they weren't necessarily connected. So an entrepreneur's journey through those resources really didn't have a lot of continuity sometimes. I've worked with business owners that have, participated and done, several different programs and say, hey, I did this one over here. I graduated from that and I did this 6 weeks and I did that, but they're not necessarily always getting that next piece. So as we were thinking about what our ecosystem meant for us, it was really important to do a couple of different things. One was to really identify what the gaps were. And were there organizations or places where people were doing things that could fill that gap? And so if it wasn't, what needed to be created? So we've been approaching the ecosystem from like that 2-part thing of really trying to figure out like what needs to be created, how do we plug in there, and then who's doing things already and doing it well. One of our main partners has been AMPS, Russell Tech Business Incubator. As we were working through the path forward and trying to kind of identify the priorities, was about the same time that concept got developed and got launched in a record amount of time. It's interesting that so many things that came out of the pandemic and the social unrest happened in a record amount of time because there was just this incredible sense of urgency, and I hope we're still holding on to that. I think we're trying to, but that program got launched, in less than a year. It was up and running and had its first cohort of, 30 people. That program is an intensive program. I think it takes in all of the cultural aspects in terms of what's needed around Black businesses and really tries to cover all of those things. And so that was really kind of the anchor partner to say that in an ideal world, if every business could get all of the things they needed, this is kind of what it would look like. We also realized at that time that there were a lot of businesses, right. And one program that had a pretty defined cohort and time was not going to be able to handle the influx of folks coming in. And so that's what led us to create the Center for Entrepreneurship to really serve as that front door of businesses coming in at any stage, at any point in their journey, really meeting folks where they are, and then really kind of understanding what those businesses needed and what other resources were going to be needed. Right. And so we kind of decided to fill that gap. But we've also worked with other lending partners and really trying to identify what are the lending sources. El Home has been one of the partners that we've worked with on that. It's one of our only locally focused CDFIs here. There are other CDFIs, which are community development financial institutions, which are financial institutions that do lending and financial products, but mission-based. And so they have an obligation to serve underserved communities. But that was one of the only ones that we had here that really had a specific local focus. So we've been kind of working with them and really trying to understand what kind of barriers folks are facing and what they can do to overcome those barriers, but then also what we can do on that technical assistance side to really get folks prepared before they actually even get to them for an application. And then there are just other things that we've had to kind of plug in just in terms of working with, Millionaire Marketplace to create opportunities for revenue generation. It's one thing to get businesses, spun up and going and, purchasing inventory. Well, they got to have somewhere to sell, those kinds of things. So really just kind of understanding what other things need to be plugged into the ecosystem. And I think that's going to be just an evolving process as well. I think we have our core partners. Like we also work with the SBDC, the local team here. We have a person that's especially assigned to kind of take on our pipeline. They do loan packaging and scouting out funding options really well. They can do all the things, but that's what they do really well. And so we're able to send folks over there to really kind of dig down and make sure that those loan applications, our funding applications are tight. So like I said, it's going to be an evolving process and figuring out, I think sometimes the further we go along, it's like, oh, yeah, you know what? We probably need to think about this, too, because now I've got 2 clients that need this. Who's doing that? Who can we plug in here?
Yeah. And what I love about what we've done, particularly in this sector, in this work of the path is, and I talk about it all the time when I go into other spaces, is we essentially built the system that we needed, right? We talk a lot at the league and through the work of the path about like systems change and being able to change the systems that impact, education, for example, or housing and all of the different things that impact the disparities that exist there. But one of the things that we were able to do, and I think it's something that we're looking to do across all of the sectors, but we certainly have accomplished, I would say, in the Black business spaces, we just built the system, right? Like we said, if these existing systems, these existing networks are not going to let us in, and give us equitable access and opportunity to the things that we need and deserve, we're going to create our own lane and our own path. And I think that has been just an amazing thing to see, again, to your point, in such a very short period of time for us to do it. And it is working. Like we are capitalizing businesses to the tune of, tens of thousands of dollars that we've been able to put into some small businesses locally here in Louisville. And that's simply amazing. And just to kind of recap, what Dave Christopher, shout out to Dave, and Amped and the incubator are doing, like they are for the businesses who have launched. They are up and they are running, and they need to be able to get to a place where they can grow and sustain and move. And what we've built here at the league and the stuff that you are running is for everybody else who's before that, right? Like it is for the folks who just have an idea and a dream, and they want to walk through the door, and we're going to help them try to figure it out to the best of our ability. What can you say that you've seen of the folks who are coming in to the league in particular?
I will say this. The vast majority of folks that we've seen coming into the league have been early stage businesses, but we've also seen some that are a little bit further along. And so we're really here to serve as the front door and to really kind of meet people where they are. Some of those people coming in might eventually be a good candidate to go into the RTBI. But then, there are some that are year-long cohort because that incubator and that program, that's not for the faint of heart either. It's very intensive. So there's a lot you can get out of it, but there's a lot you got to put into it as well. And so sometimes like that might not be the ideal scenario for, those existing businesses. So while we have seen a really large number of what I would call early stage businesses, and that's from, those that are in the idea phase to those who have maybe been kind of informally launched and running for, a year or so, we do see some existing businesses. Some of the things that we've seen, and one of the things that we're really, really trying to focus on is that internal structure and foundation of businesses. And you will see that across the board, whether they're startups or whether they're existing businesses, sometimes don't have all of the things in place. And so we knew that was one of the main reasons that a lot of folks were not being able to get access to capital. So we put a really big focus on really understanding folks, position education in terms of those early finances, and just like basic things like, is your LLC in good standing? Do you actually even have the right entity? Are you structured right? Let's look at that. Tax IDs. I think a lot of times folks register and they think, okay, I got my EIN, I'm good to go, I'm a real business now. Well, no, just like personal taxes, you got to do federal, state, and local. So let's look at those IDs. So a lot of the work that we've been doing has been really foundational work, looking at those things, understanding business models. Do you have a right business model? Let's look at your cost structure versus your revenue streams. Does that make sense? Does your value proposition really connect with the customer base that you're targeting? If not, you're kind of spinning your wheels in terms of, what you're doing as a business. So we look at a lot of those kind of just foundational things and making sure that the structure that these businesses are being built on is sound. And then I think that's much easier and gives businesses a lot more runway in order to be able to grow and certainly to sustain.
And so for, in terms of the supports and the technical assistance, like we have what we call the Black Back Office. And can you talk a little bit about what we're doing with partners and what that means for these young entrepreneurs?
Okay. The Black Back Office has been one of the things I've been super, super excited about that we've been able to do. Having done this work in the past, it was kind of hard to work with someone and say, well, you know what, you really need to have an accountant look at this. I can give you some names, that kind of thing. But really, that was about the extent of what you could do. And 9 times out of 10, knowing that they really didn't have, the funds to be able to cover paying for an accountant. This is what you need. I know you can't pay for it, but good luck. That's kind of where it stopped at. With our Black Back Office, we have the ability to do professional services. And so what that professional services consist of is, as folks are coming through, our process and they're working with the coach, and we identify goals that they want. We look at some of the challenges they're facing, how to overcome those, and set some goals. And if those goals include needing a professional to be able to do some bits and pieces of it, whether that's, creating a website, launch a marketing campaign, meeting with an accountant, getting their book set up and financial reports produced. If it's an attorney that needs to look at, leases and do reviews on, certain legal documents, things like that. We have a network of Black providers that we're able to connect those clients with and get those services done, and we have the funds to pay for it.
Wow. So that's free technical assistance that might ordinarily cost an entrepreneur thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to be able to access. And so that is just the beauty of what we're doing. And again, we're doing this across the path in lots of different areas, but it just speaks to, how equity is centered and how Black people are centered in this work, and how we are trying to remove and eliminate barriers that typically would exist elsewhere. As we start to, wrap this up, one of the things that I like to ask guests in thinking about your experiences, your lived experiences, certainly your professional experiences, what is your hope for your community? However you define that, right? Like whether it's the West End, Louisville, Black people, but what is your hope for this community moving forward? And how do you plan, to continue to engage and move towards that?
I would say 2 things, and I want to preface it with this. A lot of times I get asked the question of, why are you helping other businesses? Why are you not doing your own business? If you know all of this, have all of this knowledge and you know what the resources are, like, why are you not doing this for yourself? First and foremost, I actually get to be what some people would call an entrepreneur, meaning that, you're not starting an external business, but within the organization, you get to act entrepreneurially. So the whole process of, creating this department, kind of trying to come up with the concept in terms of how we were going to deliver services and what was needed, what resources we needed in order to be able to do it, was a way for me to exercise my kind of entrepreneurial spirit. But what I ultimately love is the problem solving. And to be able to problem solve for Black entrepreneurs is not something that I could necessarily get doing this on my own as a business, and at least not in this way that it's happening. So this is personally satisfying for me on that end. And what I hope for this program and just everything in terms of the ecosystem and the partners and anybody that's doing this work around supporting Black businesses. What I hope that we can achieve is to redefine what this next era of Black business and Black entrepreneurship looks like. There are a lot of spaces that, Black entrepreneurs have been cut out of. And we've talked about a lot of those, but it's not just in terms of the access to resources and technical assistance and capital. It's whole spaces that, Black entrepreneurs have not been in. I've had some conversations just about, the tech industry and what that's looked like and just how much Black entrepreneurs, just a teeny tiny percentage of venture capital that's going out that Black entrepreneurs are able to access, even when they actually have, tech business ideas. And so I really want to redefine that. I think we talk a lot in Louisville about kind of the heyday of Black entrepreneurship being Russell neighborhood and all of the Black businesses. I know I heard the stories from, my family of we met over here and there used to be this club called the Top Hat and right there was the dentist's office and right over there was
Walnut Street.
Yeah, all of these things. And so in some ways I feel nostalgic and trying to, kind of create that vibrancy around Black entrepreneurship. But I think it has to even be a step further than that and really defining what does that future of Black entrepreneurs look like? What things are happening now that we haven't been able to take a part in and that we can open up those doors and those opportunities. And I think, there's a lot of spaces that we can look at. And so while we're really focused on working on the foundation things, as I said before, my mind is off in the next 20 years and okay, we're going to work on these things right now. But next week, I think we should really start trying to, rotate some of these things in. I've been wanting to do some seminars on just introducing the ideas of what does scalability look like? How's that different from growth? And getting entrepreneurs to start thinking about that long-term vision from the outset. And I think so many have just been in this cycle of how do I survive or becoming an entrepreneur out of necessity. I think I'm ready for folks to be able to move beyond that and really have this whole set of vibrancy around Black entrepreneurship that looks different.
Wow. Well, that is absolutely a beautiful way to wrap things up. Cynthia Brown, director of the Center for Entrepreneurship here at the Louisville Urban League. Thank you so much for joining us this week. We absolutely appreciate it, and we will certainly have you back on. She knows Kung Fu, y'all. Again, my name is Lyndon Pryor, Chief Engagement Officer of the Louisville Urban League. Thank you all for tuning in to Listen Up, the Louisville Urban League's weekly radio show and podcast. Check us out again next week on Thursday. You all have a great week.
The Louisville Urban League Derby Gala is happening May 3rd, featuring musical guests Joe, Drew Hill, and Stokely. Listen Up listeners can win a pair of tickets to the show. All you have to do is tune in weekly to the Listen Up radio show, listen for the contest keyword, then email giveaway at lul.org with your name, phone number, and keyword. Contest runs from March 2nd through April 15th, 2023. One entry per person per episode, with 7 chances to win. The contest is open to adults 18 and up. This week's keyword is May Street Kid.
The Louisville Urban League wants to make sure that every student thrives academically, and to make that possible, the league is offering free intensive tutoring to JCPS students who qualify. Kindergarten through 12th grade students can receive expert help in reading, math, and ACT prep. Kids like me deserve every opportunity to succeed and to reach our greatest potential. Sign your student up today. To learn more, visit lul.org or call 502-585-4622.